Hello, welcome to Microfiche Microphone. I'm Micah, and on this channel we look at microfiche from the past, old newspaper articles in the public domain. We look at them with our modern eyes, our modern perspective, and see what we can learn from them. In this microfiche time capsule, we are looking back at the Juvenile Instructor from the 1st of February 1866. We are continuing our series on the Juvenile Instructor. I am enjoying reading these. I don't know how many I'm going to read verbatim, but I think I will continue to do church history periodicals for quite a while. So if you have any you would like me to read, let me know. Anyway, well, let's go ahead and take a look. So it starts off with poetry. I'll never use tobacco. I'll never use tobacco, no, it is a filthy weed. I'll never put it in my mouth, said little Robert Reed. Why, there was idle Jerry Jones, as dirty as a pig, who smoked when only 10 years old and thought it made him big. He'd spend his time and money too, and make his mother sad. She feared a worthless man would come from such a worthless lad. Wow, that's pretty harsh. And no, I'll never smoke or chew, 'tis very wrong indeed. It hurts the health, it makes bad breath, said little Robert Reed. Wow, that's quite harsh. Like, I know that it's, like, against church doctrine to smoke or chew tobacco, but, like, I am about 100% sure that Brigham Young chewed tobacco for a very long time. It took him a long time to stop. He did eventually stop, but, like, it's a little shocking to me that they would be that harsh about it. Yeah? Like, is that really the best way to teach a child, is to shame them into it? Like, I would just explain that it's bad for your health. Other than that, it's, if they decide to do it, then they have to deal with the consequences, yeah? Like, that's how I deal with it. Anyways, that's a bit harsh. What a worthless child, Like, it's a bit much. All right, biography. Joseph Smith the prophet continued. When the professors of religion in the neighborhood where Joseph lived heard that he had had a vision, they felt as the preacher did, which we described in the last number. They persecuted him, and did all in their power to injure him. Those who were most active in this business in the beginning were people who called themselves religious, but all classes joined in the persecution. Joseph was then only between 14 and 15 years old. Being a poor boy and having to work for his living, he was not considered very important. Yet after it became known that he had seen a vision, men in high standing tried to excite the public mind against him, to make the people hate and persecute him, and all this because he told the people that the Lord had spoken. This was a very strange course for men to take, was it not? Our little readers, not having had much experience of the world, will scarcely be able to understand how men can be so cruel and wicked. They think that they would never be guilty of persecuting and hating a boy because he loved God and prayed to him, and had his prayers answered. My little folks, in your innocence and simplicity, brought up to have faith in God, you cannot tell anything about the hearts and feelings of the people by your own hearts and feelings. You would not help kill the prophets and men of God of whom the Bible gives us account. You would not mock and ill-treat and crucify the Lord Jesus, the Son of God, were he now on the earth. None of you would be so base as to commit acts so desperately wicked as these. Yet men have lived who have done these things. Jesus was killed by men, and a very great number of good holy servants of God were killed before he was born on the earth, and also since his death. And those who tried to damage Joseph were bad men, men who hated God and the truth, and they cared but very little about what they did, so they could gain their wicked ends and the praise of the world. These persecutions had the effect to drive Joseph away from the society of those whom he had been taught to look up to, and who really ought to have been his friends. And as he had been forbidden to join any of the churches then on the earth, he stood alone. Being young and inexperienced, he fell into youthful foibles, for which he frequently felt condemned and very sorry. One evening, the 21st of September, 1823, when he was 17 years of old, after he had retired to bed, he was led to pray to the Lord for the forgiveness of his sins and follies, and also for the Lord to send him some kind of messenger, who could tell him of his acceptance with the Lord, and also give him knowledge about the principles of the gospel. Joseph had all confidence that the Lord would hear and grant him his prayer. When he had sought the Lord the first time, he went to him in faith, but now he could go to him with something more than faith. He knew that God would hear and answer his prayer if he would ask aright. While he was thus praying unto the Lord, he discovered a light appearing in his room. The light continued to increase until the room was lighter than it could have been made by the sun in the middle of the day. It seemed at first as though the room was filled with fire. Immediately after he saw the light, a personage appeared at his bedside. The feet of this personage did not touch the floor, but he stood in the air. He had on a robe of most exquisite whiteness, so exceedingly white and brilliant that it was beyond any earthly he had ever seen or that could be made by man. The hands and arms a little above the wrist of this heavenly being were naked, also his feet and his legs a little above the ankles. His head and neck were also bare. Though the room was exceedingly light, there was a still brighter light or glory close around his being, and his whole person was glorious beyond the power of man to describe. He was a little above the common size for men who live now, and his countenance was like lightning, yet it was very pleasing and innocent. When Joseph first looked upon him, he was afraid, but the fear soon left him, and he was filled with calmness and joy. He called Joseph by name and told him that he was a messenger sent from the presence of God to him. He also said to him that his prayers had been heard and his sins were forgiven, and that the time was at hand for the gospel in its fullness to be revealed and preached in power unto all nations, that a people might be prepared for the second coming of Jesus. He said that Joseph was called and chosen, and God had a work for him to do, and that his name should be spoken about for good and evil among all the nations and people of the earth. He told him there was a book buried in the ground which was written upon gold plates. This book gave an account of the people who lived in former days upon this continent, and who they were. The principal nation of which the book gave a history was of the family of Jacob, who was also called Israel. The Indians are the children of that people. This book also contains the fullness of the everlasting gospel as delivered by Jesus to the people of this continent. The messenger also said that, buried with the plates, were 2 stones and 2 silver bows, and these stones fastened to a breastplate were called by the people who lived in old times the Urim and Thummim. The men who possessed and used these stones were called seers in former days, and God had prepared them for the purpose of translating the book from the language in which it was written into English. He then quoted a great many prophecies which are written in the Bible to Joseph, and explained them to him, and after which he told Joseph that the time had not yet arrived for him to obtain these plates. But when he did get them, he must not show them, nor the breastplate with the Urim and Thummim, to any person, except the Lord commanded him to do so. And if he did so without being commanded, he should be destroyed. All right, that was very much verbatim also from Joseph Smith history, I believe. I don't know how much of this exactly is in there, but this is a pretty well-known story. I'm pretty sure it's in there. Anyways, so far we're staying with Joseph Smith's own history that he wrote himself. I'll be interested to see when we stray from that, because at some point you're going to run out of material. Yeah, I told you this ran for 7 years, so we'll see. I think it was 7. Anyways. All right, the Good Samaritan. It was a very common practice for the Lord Jesus Christ when here on the earth, after teaching the people some of the laws of the gospel, to tell them some short story or history to enable them to better remember the truths he wished to impress upon their minds. These stories are called parables, and the picture at the top of this little article is intended to illustrate one of those parables, called the Good Samaritan. In the first place, we will have the story and then the meaning of it. There once lived a man who was a Jew, who had to travel from the city of Jerusalem to another city called Jericho. While on his way, he was attacked by a band of robbers who took everything away from him, even stripping his clothes off his back, and beating him most cruelly. And when they had done this, they left him, naked, fainting, nearly dead by the roadside, to die of his wounds, to be parched to death with thirst, or to be killed by the burning rays of the sun, falling on his naked and bleeding body. When he had laid there some time, a Jewish priest came along to where he was, one of those men who pretended to be very merciful and kind-hearted, and who wished the people to believe that he was a very holy and God-fearing. Now what do you think he did? Go and help the poor man up, and give him some water to drink, and bind up his wounds, and throw his robe over his shoulders? You would think so, but he did not. When he got near, he pretended not to see him, and he turned his head another way, and went on his journey, not caring whether the poor man lived or died. Soon after, another member of the Jewish priesthood, called a Levite, came along the road, and he went up to the man, and looked at him laying there in his sufferings. He gave him no help, however, but crossed over to the other side of the road, and walked on, leaving the man to his fate. By and by, a man of another part of the country came along, and the priest and the Levite would not speak to him, for they thought they were better than he was. He did not go to Jerusalem like them to worship the God of Israel. Now this man was called a Samaritan, because the country he came from was called Samaria, and his people and the Jews were at enmity with each other. But when he came along the road, he saw the poor bleeding Jew, though he was one of those who despised his people. He went to him, and raised him up, and poured wine and oil into his wounds, as you will see in the picture, and gave him some water to drink, and covered him with his own robe, and set him on his own beast, and carefully and tenderly carried him to an inn, telling the host to look well after him until he was recovered, and able to continue his journey. And he would pay what it cost, and then left the Jew and went on his journey. Now, what do you think Jesus wanted the people to understand? What moral did he wish to convey? A certain lawyer of the Jews had been asking him some questions, trying to get him to say something that he could find fault with. Jesus had been telling him that if he wished to obtain salvation, he must love the Lord his God with all his heart, with all his soul, and with all his strength, and with all his mind, and his neighbor as himself. Then said the lawyer, "Who is my neighbor?" Now this story was the answer of Jesus. When he had told it, he asked the lawyer, "Which now of these three, thinkest thou, was neighbor unto him that fell among thieves?" And the lawyer said, "He that showed mercy on him." Then Jesus said, "Go thou and do likewise." We should learn, as well as the lawyer, that all men and women are our neighbors, as they are all sons and daughters of God, our Heavenly Father, that when we see anyone in suffering or want or in pain, we should not first ask whether they belong to the same ward or city that we do, whether they were born in the same country as we, or in England or France or Germany, but like the Good Samaritan, who, when he found even an enemy of his people, blessed and helped him, do all the good we can. In fact, Jesus taught this lesson of kindness to all men, of every creed and nation, for we are all God's children, and it is our duty to aid and bless the brethren and sisters. If any of our little friends wish to read this parable, it is in the Bible. They will find it in the 10th chapter of St. Luke's Gospel. R. That's lovely, and I would not expect less of a children's magazine for, like, church-oriented children's magazine. So, yeah, that was lovely depiction of it, and just really able to make you think, like, what would you do? Yeah, in that situation. Very nice. All right. February. The month of February derived its name from the Latin word februare, which means to purify, because in the latter part of this month the Romans held a festival of general purification called Februa. When the Roman calendar was made, it contained only 10 months, but afterward 2 more were added, one of which was January and the other February. These months were added by a man named Numa, who reigned over the Romans. After Romulus, the founder of Rome, he commenced to reign 40 years after Rome was founded, and reigned about 42 years. He made February the first month in the year, and January the last month. But 452 years before the Savior was born, this arrangement was changed, and the year was reckoned from the 1st of January. From that time until the present, February has been the 2nd month of the year. I like these history lessons, because I didn't know much of this. Like, this is new to me. Kind of cool, yeah? We may glean knowledge by reading, but the chaff must be separated from the wheat by thinking. Knowledge is proud that he has learned so much. Wisdom is humble that he knows no more. I kind of like that, yeah? Like, knowledge is, is learning, but wisdom is knowing that you don't know everything, yeah? Okay, so this picture's a little silly. This little boy with this little stick figure, yeah? The future artist, oh yeah, I'm sure he's a future artist, yeah? Doubtless many of our young readers have tried to draw figures on their slates with pencil, like the boy in our illustration. He has not been very successful. His figure, likely intended to represent a man, is very far from being the likeness of anything. Its legs have no thighs, nor knees, nor joints. Its arms are straight strokes, and its fingers are very poor imitations indeed. They are about all equal, though, and to the rest of the figure. Yet, just see how pleased he is. He is proud of his labor, as he sits there smiling, with an old keg for his seat, and a book lying beside it, on which the likeness of a horse is seen. As he holds his slate so that the sketch can be seen, he looks as satisfied as if it were equal to that on the page of the open book. He is the picture of satisfied contentment. Do you ever try to draw? If you do, do not be discouraged. Even if your attempts should be no better than this one. Try again is a good motto. So keep trying till you make a good picture of what you are endeavoring to draw. There are rules by which you can learn to do this, and if you have a desire and talent for it, do not neglect that talent. It is the gift of God and is given to be wisely used and to do good. Oh, I like that. Yeah, don't be discouraged if you're not, amazing at art when you first try it, but keep trying, yeah, persevere. Yeah, you might get better. You never know. Traveling on snowshoes. In this article, we propose giving our little reader an idea of how people go from place to place on this kind of shoes, as well as a description of them. They are called snowshoes because they cannot be used to any advantage where there is no snow. Did you ever try to wade through the snow where it is waist deep? If you have, then you know that it is very hard work, and it takes a long time to go a short distance. Many times men are under the necessity of going through the mountains in the winter, when the snow is very deep, and if they had to wade through it, they might perish. Well, snowshoes are intended expressly for goings over deep snow, and a man used to traveling on them can go 20 or 30 miles a day, where without them they could not go 5 miles. So thus you see their use and advantage. In this country they are made out of cedar wood or red pine, because these kinds of timber are springy and will bend a great deal before they break. A snowshoe should be 9 feet long and 4 inches wide. They are about half an inch thick in the middle, and shaved thinner and narrower towards each end. The end that goes before is made very thin for about a foot, and then put in hot water and bent or turned up like a sled runner, and tied so that it remains bent. You have all seen sleds and know why the runners turn up in front, is to keep them from running in the ground. And snowshoes turn up to make them slip over the rough snow or anything that may come in the way. A leather strap is then nailed across the middle of the shoe to slip the toe of the boot in, and a little block of wood ticked across the shoe just behind the strap to keep the heel from working forward. The shoe is then ready for use. You can now put your feet in the straps and by keeping your shoes close together, glide over the snow, but it requires practice before you can use them with ease. The reason why they will keep you from sinking in the snow is because they are long and cover a large surface of snow. If you lay a plank on the snow, you can step on it and it will not sink down with you. If you can tell the reason why it does not sink in the snow, then you can explain to your little friends the reason why men can go from place to place on snowshoes, when they could not possibly travel far without them. But this kind of traveling is anything but comfortable and is never undertaken only in cases of actual necessity, and is attended many times with severe trials. You may have seen an account this winter of Brother Charles C. Rich's journey from his home in Bear Lake Valley. He had to go on snowshoes from Franklin in Cache Valley to Paris in Bear Lake Valley, a distance of only 30 miles, through the mountains, but it took him 3 days to go that distance because the snow was thawing and stuck to the shoes, making it very hard and slow work to travel. When the snow is dry, the shoes will pass over it with ease, but when wet, it gathers on them and you have to drag the shoes, and all the snow that sticks to them. All the bedding and provision that is required on a journey of this kind must be carried on the back, and when night comes on, you must choose the best place you can find, which is generally in the snow, and make yourself content whether it is comfortable or not. JCR. Trying to think if I could think of anybody with those initials, but I can't off the top of my head. What they're describing are skis, not snowshoes. Obviously, like cross-country skis, which is great if you are traveling over snow, but it's not snowshoes. Interesting that they called them snowshoes back then, yeah? So I'm just gonna Google really quick. Yeah, see, they look like more like tennis rackets, yeah? Okay, so no, it says that the original snowshoes were very long, and some were round while others were square, and some snowshoes were fat and wide while others were long and narrow. And they quickly discovered that snowshoes took different forms for different conditions. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so that makes sense that that in this part of the country, I guess the long, thin ones are more like skis, tended to be more useful, whereas in other parts of the world, maybe that wasn't the case. Anyways, I did find that interesting, though. Okay, sow good seed. Children, if you had prepared a piece of ground in the spring and wanted to have some fruit and shade trees grow there, you would not plant sunflower seed for the trees to grow from. If you planted sunflower seed, you would expect a crop of sunflowers, would you not? If you saw a man sowing wild flaxseed or wild oats in his ground and harrowing it in, you would not expect that he would have anything else but wild flax or wild oats for a crop at harvest time, would you? And if he were to tell you that he would have a crop of good wheat from that seed, there is scarcely a little boy in the country a little boy or girl in the country that would not know better, and we think they would be apt to laugh at him for such an idea. Almost every child knows that if a farmer wants to raise a crop of wheat, he must sow wheat, and if he wishes to raise fruit trees, he must put the seed of the fruit which he desires to raise in the ground for the tree to grow from. The earth, if properly tended, will yield a good crop of the kind of seed which is planted, but it will not change one seed into another. Now, children, did you ever think that your hearts are like the earth in this respect? With this difference, however, that you have the power which the earth has not to cultivate any seed that you choose. If men sow bad seed in the earth, it grows, and the earth does not seem to have the power to prevent it. But you have the power to check the growth of evil seeds in your hearts. God plants good seeds in your hearts. The devil plants evil seeds there and tries to do so. Which do you wish to have grow? If you let the bad seeds grow, they will produce a bad crop. But if you cherish the good seeds and cultivate them, and pluck up the bad weeds, you will have a crop after a while that will fill you, yourselves, and the Lord, and holy angels, and good men with joy. Children, do you feel tempted to tell lies, to say bad and vulgar words, to steal, to fight, to be disobedient, to be peevish and angry? These are all bad seeds which are struggling to grow within you. Do not suffer them to remain there. Pull them up and cast them out before they get rooted. You know how hard it is to pull up weeds that have grown for weeks in your father's gardens. Their roots are strong and deep, but if they are pulled as soon as they peep out of the ground, they come up easy. Give the good seeds a fair chance in your hearts while you are young, and you will not have much trouble with the weeds after that. We have known boys who have done this, and they are now men whom God, angels, and good men love and respect. And we have known boys who have permitted the bad seeds to grow, but they have not produced good fruit. The fruit has been the same as the seed, bad, and they are wretched, miserable men. You have perhaps seen two lots lying side by side, owned by two neighbors, and both planted with equally good seed. One is kept clear of weeds. They are not allowed to grow, but the other is never weeded, and the weeds grow up and cover and choke out the good seed. One yields a crop of good seed, and the other a crop of weeds. The fault was not in the land, but in the owner of the land. He did not cultivate it. So also with men. One man brings forth good fruit, and another evil. Has one been blessed with better soil than the other from which to produce good fruit? Is there such a difference in the hearts of men when they are young? Depend upon it, children. It is not because your hearts differ that one produces good fruit and another evil, but it is because one is properly cultivated and the other is not. Well, that's interesting. Like, you know, everybody knows the parable of the sower, so I think that they're just, a lot of these people in this area were farmers, so they could definitely relate to that one more than some of the other parables, so I can see why they would like point this one out. All right, voices from nature, the 7 oaks. 7 oaks, huh? Interesting. Okay. Before Christianity was introduced in Germany, there lived on the banks of the river Elbe in Europe a Polish chief, who planted in the yard of his castle, in memory of his 7 sons that had fallen in battle, 7 oaks, naming at the same time the castle after them. 12 centuries have passed over castle and oaks since that time. The dark forests of the surrounding country have been replaced by fruitful fields, lovely villages and thriving towns. The language, the religion, the manners, customs, laws, and governments of the people around have changed many times since then, and of the old castle repeatedly burnt down and built up again. Only a few gray walls overgrown with ivy are left, and the 7 oaks. 2 stumps you can see standing yet near the ruins of the ancient battlements, and they are stone. I'm definitely going to have to look this up afterwards, okay? Often have I stood before them when a boy, and wondered if those stumps, hard as flint, but preserving as in mockery the appearance of wood, were ever green, covered with leaves, and if birds sang under their branches too. How is it that a tree can turn into stone? Have we a miracle before us, or only a specimen of the agency of some law of nature? To these and similar questions nature always gives answer, if we will only study her glorious and truthful language. These 2 petrified stumps are not the only ones of their kind, for in almost every country do we find such objects, not only trees and plants of various kinds, but also beasts, skeletons of birds, fishes, and reptiles. I hate the word fishes. The word is fish. It's okay. In the moment the spirit departs from any creature, animal, or plant, the elements of which the body was composed endeavor to sever their connection with one another as fast as possible. The way this decomposition, as it is called, is carried on is quite various. Sometimes it is done by means of fire, or the bodies burn. Then one portion of them goes up into the air as smoke, the other remains behind as ashes. In another instance the elements separate more slowly, and the body falls gradually to pieces. Then we say the body decays. In both cases the very shape of the animal or plant is dissolved. The last change the elements cause with bodies is represented to us in those two petrified stumps of oaks. When the substances of the bodies leave it very slowly and gradually, the earth surrounding them has time to fill up the vacancies with its own material, keeping the body from falling to pieces until finally all vegetable or animal matter is gone and has been replaced by mineral substances, which retain not only the form but also in a great many instances the color of the body, so faithfully that you cannot notice any difference by merely looking at it. Thus many of the monsters of former periods of our earth, or interesting objects of bygone generations, have been preserved and handed down over to us by nature as testimonies of the unceasing wisdom and power of their Creator. But, my young friends, as those two petrified stumps once greened and bloomed with their mates as 7 live oaks, and the Spirit of life had his throne within them, causing them to grow in strength and beauty, thus is also the Spirit of Him who created you residing in your hearts, causing you to think, to love, to hope, to grow, even to be exalted to the glories of a higher state. When life's changes come, when many a storm will have passed over your heads, when bitter sorrows should have tried you, or business or pursuit of earthly prosperity occupied your mind for long years, will it ever happen with any of you that your heart, full of hope, love, innocence, and life, should get cold and hard, and you, although in outward appearance a man with all the attributes of the Father above us, should have become so filled with the interests of this world that there would be no room left for the elements of your divine origin? Then, oh then, would the genius of life, the guardian angel from the heavens, turn mournfully away from you, singing, of stone, of stone. Carl G. Mazer. Wow. That was quite poetic, yeah? I am curious, however, about the 7 oaks. So let's look it up. Unfortunately, there are a lot of companies that use this term 7 oaks. Alright, this is probably the closest one I'm going to find. Either this person, Carl G. Mazer, did not remember the story properly, or it was told to him differently. So I don't know which one that is, but it's not exactly the same story. But I'm getting this from livelikeagerman.com, which is called The 1,000-Year-Old Oaks of Ivanacher. Yeah? Loud metallic sounding noises disturb your sleep. You wake up, your back leaning against an oak tree. You know what? I'm going to skip this part. Hang on. Location. The Ivanach Oaks is a park in the Mecklenburg Lake Plateau in Mecklenburg, Western Pomerania. So that's in northern Germany. Yeah. Legends around the oak forest. Around the trees, giants entwine a variety of legends and stories. Some of the legends allude to the monastery that once existed here. Nuns of the Cistercian monastery. One story goes that 7 nuns of the Cistercian monastery Ivanach broke their vows and were turned into oaks as punishment. After 1,000 years, the first of the 7 is redeemed and the oak dies. 100 years later, the second of the nuns is redeemed, and so it happens every 100 years until all the nuns are redeemed. Okay. Another legend tells that the 7 nuns were surprised in their sleep by robbers and fled half-naked into the forest. The next morning they were ashamed of their sinful appearance and asked the Lord God to protect them like the trees in the forest. The request was heard and they were transformed into oaks. This is okay. Legend has it that the strongest oak tree was planted by a nun who, although already engaged, was brought to the Ivanach monastery by her relatives. The nun placed her engagement ring around the delicate trunk of the tree. Since then, the ring has participated in the growth of the oak tree and still enclosed in the trunk today, even though it is not visible to the human eye. That's a weird legend. Herodotus. The following story is mostly based on truth. I like that they say mostly. At the beginning of the 19th century, there was a famous gray stallion, Herodotus, at the Ivanach stud. In 1806, he was hidden from the approaching French in a hollow oak tree, but he betrayed himself by neighing, was brought out, and Napoleon rode him as a lead horse. In 1814, Marshal Blucher brought the stallion back to Mecklenburg. Herodotus was buried under an oak tree 1,000 meters north of Stavenhagen Station. Sure. Like, these are really weird legends. Legends are weird. Yeah. I don't think any of those are true, but I was trying to find out where it was. Yeah. But I'm guessing that this is the one he's talking about, the Seven Oaks. So, and the fact that they were like, oh, the nuns are redeemed now, so, like, it makes sense that they would cut down one every 100 years or something. I don't know. I don't know if that's true, but anyways, moving on. Sorry. I'm really not into legends, if you can't tell. Okay. Simple science. Echoes. Have you ever heard words repeated from a distance after they had been spoken, as if there was something mocking the speaker, though there was no person where the sound was repeated from? That is what is called echo. Sounds of any kind are thus repeated more or less distinctly. To explain the cause of this, we must tell you that sounds of every kind are carried in the air around us, of which we breathe, as they are made. Though we cannot see the air, it is around the earth like a great ocean, and supposed to reach between 40 and 50 miles upward, being thinner the higher it is from the earth. If you will throw a small pebble into a pond of water, you will see the water moving towards the edges of the pond, from the spot where the pebble struck it, in circling waves. In this manner, when a sound is made, it strikes the air, which moves in the same manner as the water bearing the sound with it, and the further it goes, it moves with less force until it has not strength to move the air any further. Then it cannot be heard. That is why a loud noise is heard farther than one not so loud. If these little eddies of air strike on a flat surface, such as the side or gable of a house, or a flat rock, or anything of the kind, they are being driven with force. They will rebound, and the sound be carried back to where it was made. When the surface struck is near, the sound returns immediately. When it is at a considerable distance, the echo does not occur for some time after the sound is made. When persons speak in walking under an archway or tunnel, they appear to be talking much louder than if they were not under them, because the sound is immediately thrown back, and it seems like one sound. There are many places where remarkable echoes occur. One of these is Echo Canyon, east of the city, where the high rocks with flat surfaces facing different ways produce a number of sounds. On the banks of the Rhine, at Lurlei, if the weather be favorable, the report of a rifle or the sound of a trumpet will be repeated at different periods, and with various degrees of strength, from crag to crag on opposite sides of the river alternately. A similar effect is heard in the neighbourhood of some of the lochs in Scotland. There is a place at Woodstock in Gloucestershire, which is said to echo a sound 50 times. Near Bosaneath, a few miles from Glasgow, there is a spot where, if a person plays a bar of music upon a bridge, the notes will be repeated by an echo, but a third lower, after a short pause. Another echo is heard, again in a lower tone, then follows another pause, and a third repetition follows in a still lower key. The effect is very enchanting. Well, I have to give them props for getting the science right, yeah? Like, I'm impressed with how much they knew about, like, sound waves and stuff. Politeness is like an air cushion. There may be nothing in it, but it eases our jolts wonderfully. I like that. Science strengthens and enlarges the mind. I think that's, no one can disagree with that. Dare to be good, though the world laugh at you. I like that too. All right, the Indians. Now, the last couple of articles have just been about the Book of Mormon, and I'm guessing this one's no different. So, throwing out the title, The Indians, I would call it the Book of Mormon stories. Yeah? So let's take a look. Laman and Nephi visit Laban. When Nephi and his brothers arrived near Jerusalem, they consulted together and concluded to cast lots to see which of them should go ask Laban for the brass plates containing the records. The lot fell upon Laban. So he went up to Laban's house and, after being invited in, sat and conversed with him for a little while. Now it is quite probable that Lehi and all his family were well acquainted with Laban before they left Jerusalem, so that they had some reason to expect a kind reception. But when Laban told his business and asked for the plates, Laban was greatly enraged, abused him shamefully, called him a thief, and would have killed him had he not fled out of his house. When Laman returned to his brothers and told them the treatment he had received from Laban, they were all very sorrowful, for Laman and Lemuel wanted to go back to their father without the plates. But Nephi said, "No, God sent us here for them, and we will not go back without them, for the Lord always gives his children power in some way to do what he commands them." So after another consultation they concluded to go and gather together all the gold and silver and precious things that belonged to their father, which he had left in his house at Jerusalem, and offered to exchange them with Laban for the plates of brass. The brass plates were not worth a great deal except for what was written upon them, and Laban, being a wicked man, did not care about the good things they contained. But Lehi's sons wanted to show Laban that they did not wish to steal or beg the plates from him, but were willing to pay him a great deal more than they were worth to anyone but themselves. So they all went up to Laban's house, carrying their riches with them, and offered him the whole of them for the plates. But when Laban saw their great treasures, he coveted them, and as he refused to let them have the plates, he determined to kill them and take their property. So he quarreled with them, drove them out of his house, and sent his servants to murder them. Nephi and his brothers escaped, however, out of their hands, but had to leave all their treasures behind. This was a sad blow to them all, and they felt more sorrowful than ever. Laman and Lemuel became very angry with Nephi and Sam and began to beat and abuse them, charging them with being the cause of their troubles. But while Laman and Lemuel were thus cruelly beating their younger brothers as they dwelt in the cave in the mountains near Jerusalem, an angel suddenly appeared in their midst and rebuked them for their wickedness and violence, telling them that the Lord had chosen Nephi because of his righteousness to be their ruler and leader, and commanded them to go up once more to Jerusalem, promising that the Lord would deliver Laban into their hands. Many of our little readers will, no doubt, wonder if angels ever come to visit people in these days. Yes, numbers of persons have had very glorious and happy visits from them during the last 30 or 40 years, and many more might enjoy this privilege if they would only seek for it, and make their hearts, their persons, and their houses clean and pure. For good angels will not visit wicked men and women, nor naughty children. Neither do they like to go into dirty houses. They only love those who are good and gentle, kind and clean, who love God and try to do as he and his servants tell them. The Lord loves little children who pray to him, who try to be good and obedient to their parents, and he sends his angels to watch over and take care of them, although we do not see them. Still, there are some of them near us most of the time, and a great many children have had their eyes opened by the Spirit of the Lord, so that they could see them, and some of our little readers may be so happy some day as to see them and enjoy their company, if they will only try to overcome their naughty feelings, always speak the truth, and not forget to pray to the Lord. After the angel left Nephi and his brethren, Laman and Lemuel still complained and murmured, but as Nephi was determined to go once more to Jerusalem, as the angel had commanded, they concluded to go with him. It was after dark when they arrived at Jerusalem, and Nephi told his brothers to wait outside the walls while he went up into the city. He proceeded very cautiously, and, on arriving to Laban's house, found a man lying in the street before him, drunk. He stooped down to see who it was, and found that it was Laban. He had a gird around his waist, a very beautiful and valuable sword, the hilt or handle of which was made of gold, and the blade was the very best steel. Nephi took this sword out of its scabbard, and cut off Laban's head with it. He hesitated to do it at first, as he had never killed anyone before, but the Spirit of the Lord told him to do it, because Laban was a wicked man and would not obey God. And besides, he had tried to kill Nephi and his brothers, and had robbed them of all their treasures, and would not give them the plates. He therefore deserved to die. Nephi then stripped Laban of his clothes, and put them upon himself, girding his sword around him also, and went towards Laban's house. On his way he met Zoram, Laban's servant, who, supposing Nephi to be his master, readily obeyed his command to fetch the brass plates out of Laban's treasury to bring them outside the city walls. Upon Nephi's approach, his brethren fled from him in dismay, supposing him to be Laban, and that having killed their brother, he was now come to slay them. Nephi called after them, however, and as soon as they heard his voice, they were glad they returned. Zoram, finding that he had not been following Laban, as he supposed, trembled and turned to flee. But Nephi knew that if Zoram went back to Jerusalem to tell what had happened, the wicked Jews would follow them and tried to kill them and his brothers. So being a large and very strong man, he laid hold of Zoram to prevent his running away, and talked to him until he finally consented to accompany them into the wilderness to their father Lehi. To be continued. That is very verbatim from the Book of Mormon. I do find it interesting, that paragraph about angels. I wasn't really expecting it. It kind of came out of nowhere. Saying that if you want to see angels, you should, clean your room and listen to your parents. That's kind of a big promise for, little things. I don't know. Because the truth is, there are not very many people who have claimed to see angels in this world. So, I feel like that's kind of a lot to promise a child who is good and kind and does their chores. Yeah? I don't know. Kind hints. Little boys and girls should not use tea or coffee, nor drink soup or anything else while it is hot. Why? Because the Lord has told us that it is not good to do so. This is a very literal interpretation of the word of wisdom, yeah? Because it literally says hot drinks. Now we are all satisfied that God knows what is best for us, not only in eating and drinking, but in everything else that affects our happiness in this life as well as in the life to come. And when he has been so kind as to speak to us and tell us what is for our good, do you not think it very ungrateful and wicked not to pay attention to what he says? What do you think of children who habitually disregard the wishes of their parents? You would say they do not love their fathers and mothers, or they would do as they tell them. And the angels and good men who will think that we do not love God much if we do not strive to please him in every respect. God has also said that it is not good for us to use tobacco or liquor or to eat much meat in summer. And he has promised all who will give heed to his advice and obey all his commandments shall become very wise and very good. People who do not use any hot drinks, tobacco, intoxicating liquors, nor a great deal of meat, are always healthier, happier, and handsomer than those who do. Now, if any of the little boys and girls who read this have indulged in these or other bad habits, we hope they will discontinue them at once, and if they have not formed them, we trust that they will not be so foolish as to do so. If they will abstain from the use of tea, coffee, tobacco, intoxicating liquors, bad words, and everything that is wicked, they will grow up to be healthy, happy, wise, and useful men and women, and they will be loved by the Lord and by all good people. Okay, this is a little bit extreme, because according to official church doctrine today, it does not include hot drinks in the sense of like hot chocolate or like hot soup. I think that's a little bit silly. And I was also thinking about like, why would they say don't eat meat in summer? Now, if you think about it, back then they didn't have refrigeration. They were not able to freeze things in the summer. So if you slaughtered a pig, for example, then you needed to eat the meat right away, or you'd have to smoke it to a point where it would be preserved for a long time, or preserve it in some other way, however you wanted to do it. I mean, there are a couple different things to do it, but yeah. Anyways, and in the summertime, because there's no refrigeration, it's more likely to go bad very quickly. Like if you left it out overnight and it hadn't been completely cured, and how could you cure a full pig in that time? Like it would be really hard. So I think that that's the reason why that particular piece of advice was given, and to only eat meat in the winter when it's cold out, and it's cold enough that you could store it in a place where it would either freeze or be very close to freezing, and in which case, yeah, that makes more sense, doesn't it? Anyways, I was just thinking about that. Although it is bad for your general health to eat too much meat, so that could also be part of it. Anyways, just a speculation on my part. The lion. The lion is not a very large animal, is it not large? But is very strong and powerful, so much so that he is called the king of beasts. The illustration above represents what is told in the following fable. A fable, we must tell you, is a short story conveying a moral by which some principle is taught. Okay, here we go. Is this the Lion and the Mouse? Ah, yes, it is. Okay, a lion had a little mouse in his power and was just going to set his paw on it and crush it to death, when the little thing pleaded for its life and let the lion go, and the lion let it go. The mouse, full of gratitude, thanked the lion and said if it ever had the opportunity, it would do a good turn for the lion. The powerful beast looked down on it with contempt, wondering how such a little thing could imagine it could ever be of service to him. But by and by the lion was caught in a net set for him by some hunters. And when the little mouse heard the roars of its preserver, who was unable to free itself, it came and cut the meshes of the net with its sharp little teeth and set the lion free. This is the fable, and though beasts cannot talk, the moral is that we should never despise the power of anything to do good, no matter how insignificant it may appear to be. The following extract from a book called Algeria and Tunis, concerning a pet lion, is interesting. A gentleman visiting at the house in Algeria says in a few minutes the door opened and a lion entered the room, the man only leading him by a tuft of his mane. He was a magnificent animal, 2 years old and full grown, all but his mane, which, although but a foot long, made nevertheless a respectable appearance. He did not seem to care about our being strangers, but walking about the room like a large dog, permitted us to take liberties with him, such as patting him, shaking a paw, making him exhibit his teeth and claws, He showed, however, a marked predilection in favor of his old acquaintances, and lying down before them, turned on his back to be scratched. After a scratch or two he began to yawn and was fairly setting himself for a nap, when a cigar was puffed in his face, a proceeding he evidently did not approve of. Rising in a hurry, curling up his lips and wrinkling his nose, he exposed to view a splendid set of teeth, a sure sign he was not pleased. A hearty sneeze seemed to restore him to good temper, and bearing no malice, he returned a friendly pat bestowed upon him by Captain Martineau, who had been the aggressor, by rubbing his head caressingly against his knees. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting because, most people don't know how a real lion would behave in those kind of circumstances. It must be very well fed, or else it wouldn't be so docile. Yeah. Also, I do not recommend having wild animals as pets in any sense of the word. It can be very dangerous to keep wild animals as pets. Wild animals were never meant to be pets, and yeah, they weren't, it's not part of the evolution. They are wild for a reason, so I don't recommend this at all. However, it is interesting to hear about from a distance that I don't want to be close to. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed that this time. There was a lot in this one. Let's see, lion, word of wisdom, the Layman and Lemuel story, echoes, 7 oaks. Yeah, that was weird. Sow good seed. Yeah, parable of the sower. Traveling on snowshoes, which were actually skis. Future artist encouraging kids to draw. February. What else we got? The Good Samaritan. Biography of Joseph Smith, and that really weird poem, I'll Never Use Tobacco. So it's a little bit word of wisdom heavy this time, I think. But it was just very interesting. I don't know what else to say about it, because some of it was cool, some of it was could be better. But I mean, I feel like we have come so far in the last, 150 years plus, and I just really am very grateful that we have come so far in the world and that we don't think like this anymore. Yeah? Like a lot of the ways of thinking that they had, like never eat, hot soup. It's fine. Just don't burn your tongue, okay? Anyways, I don't know. I just found that really interesting. So, let me know what you thought in the comments below. If you liked the video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next video.